And away we go. And as I said, I am WA5LEE. I'm one of the AECs for the Northwest D14. And tonight we are going to discuss digital messaging, also known as What's It All About Alfie, or how not to drive the net control and backup net control crazy each week. And this doesn't necessarily mean that Sunday is when your drill is, but this would apply to any day of the week. Whoever's running net control for at least our division, our area, wakes up Sunday morning all happy, ready to get on the radio. And by the end of the day, they pretty much look like this. We have to sort through a lot of information with our digital nets, and I'm sure your digital net controllers have to do the same thing. So what we'd like to go through today is, first of all, we'd like to cover why we actually use digital messaging and the Winlink basics and how we use it. This will not be Winlink 101. That is covered extensively and fantastically by Linda and Dave and other assorted people. So assuming everybody here knows how to work the basics of Winlink, we will not get into it. We're going to cover different bands and modes that we use and other technologies that are commonly used for digital messaging. We're going to get into some forms, which we commonly use and will encounter both during training and deployments during actual emergencies. Most importantly, how to properly use the forms, and specific to our area, best practices for the weekly digital check-ins. What I call this the DOM segment, number 4, because Dominic and 5TCB, one of my fellow net control, backup net control people, it's a stickler for him, it's a stickler for me, and I know the other people get a little bit crazy on Sundays when we have to kind of collate all the digital check-ins. So we're going to get into that a little bit. So first off, why do we use digital messaging? Well, it's faster than voice under most circumstances, conveys more information in less time. They can travel longer distances than voice using better spectrum efficiency. There is forward error correction in most modes, makes the message get sent and received correctly, which is very important. You can send forms, messages, lists, email, pictures, porn. Well, no, you can't do porn. That's against the rules, but you can send other attachments. And it's very important when accuracy can mean the difference between life and death. Most of us have very little occasion to practice emergency and disaster communications outside of amateur radio exercises. And our daily lives now involve normalcy, well, COVID-19 notwithstanding. So why exercise with Winlink and digital nodes? Well, Winlink is generally preferred digital emergency messaging system in the South Texas region. This may be different. Your mileage may vary depending on where you are. The Northeast does not, as a rule, or has not in the past, use Winlink. They're more fldigi people, and we'll get into that a little later. Emergency communication skills are perishable. You don't use them, you lose them. Now, when everything hits the fan, we're going to have to hit the ground running, and spending 15 to 20 minutes per week on a digital check-in is a small time investment that yields consistent returns and skills. Regular practice helps us to develop speed and efficiency and gives us the opportunity to experiment with different antennas, radios, and batteries if we're so inclined. You can go to a park on a Sunday morning and send in your digital check-ins. I know Dave likes to do that. He likes to go Baja-ing with his Jeep and do his digital check-ins. Winlink exercises help us better operate within the NIMS system and within the requirements of the hospital incident management system, HIMSS. A lot of us serve hospitals around here. With the hospitals we support as well, other served agencies, American Red Cross, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, coming up in a couple weeks. And it also tests the viability and health of the systems, nodes, and gateways. And that makes the people that take care of the hardware very happy, because it gives them an idea of how well the actual hardware is working. So let's get in a little bit to Winlink 2000 architecture without getting too deep into it. I had to make a couple of changes because Winmore used to be in there, so I changed Winmore to Vara. Basically, the internet sits in the middle as RMS gateways between the content management systems, basically email servers. There's 5 of them. There may be 6 this week, who knows? And the clients, which are you. And the Winlink radio-only network is basically these RMS, the message receiving stations, transmit their data that they've received to and from the local users, as well as to each other using a mode called Pactor. And we'll get into those different stuff as well. So anyway, starting out, bands and frequencies and modes. Bands and frequencies available change due to propagation. Everybody knows that. In a real life event situation may change us to be adaptable due to changing parameters in propagation. Some gateways may not be available during an actual event. We all know what happens when one of our favorite gateways doesn't work. Everybody cries and screams at Dave, what happened? Not every gateway has every mode available. In other words, some modes have been removed from some gateways. Not every gateway would have every band available either. The receiving agency may only have certain modes available. They may have a preference in what type of form they will receive. Vis-a-vis, good example is the ARC coming up. They want radiograms. The receiving agency may insist on a certain mode or certain particular form. Different modes are different speeds, different clarity, and or error correction. And some of the modes, also known as protocols, that you may or may not be familiar with. Telnet, everybody knows what Telnet is. That's pretty much email over email. It's very internet dependent. Doesn't really work unless you have internet going on. But it is the fastest, quickest, simplest way of sending email. We all use Outlook and Gmail now. We don't need Telnet that much. Packet radio, nodes, many stations on one frequency, especially in this area, don't only necessarily work on this one frequency, but down in this area, we have kind of consolidated a bunch of them. They forward to the message receiving system if the internet is unavailable through HF using Pactor, and that's if the system operator has it configured that way. Different modes of Pactor, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is not currently allowed. 4 is very high speed, although the FCC does grant temporary lifts on the restrictions for level 4, like we did during Hurricane Sandy, and a few weeks after that. I don't know if it's still in place, probably is not. Pactor has automatic frequency tracking, and the downside of Pactor is that not everybody can afford the hardware. It's $1,000 to $2,000 for a good standard modem nowadays because there's licensing involved. There's RDOT, which is has strong forward error correction, but the downside is the slow bandwidth speed. And WinMore, which is no more. So we won't even get into that. It's been deprecated. It was very solid for many years, and they've kind of taken it out of most of the nodes. Now, my favorite mode in particular is vara, which I call Varaluya. I know that's funny. User data rate up to 5.6 kbps on HF, and believe it or not, up to 100 kbps or greater on VHF and UHF with great clarity with low signal to noise ratio. One of the downsides of it, it's $70 for the full speed version. You get 2 versions, the VHF, UHF, which is called Vara FM, and the HF version, which is called Vara HF. However, even if you do not upgrade to the full speed version, it's pretty darn fast in the free version, but it does have an annoying reminder screen that pops up when you transmit a message or you can do a connection, reminding you that, hey, we'd like you to pay the $70. That's totally a person's choice, depending on how often you plan on using it. It's still pretty fast as the free version. Now, the most important thing that I'd like to share with you today, which is something new, it's soon to be digi Peter compatible. And I'd like to show you a little brief video for you people who are tech heads. The video I want to show you here was just taken the other day of the beta version of VARA that's out that does digi Peters, just like Packet does. And if you can make sense of this and you're a bit of a gearhead, I know Dave's going to understand it, and a bunch of the rest of you are. So just stick with me and check this out because it's really cool. It's basically kicking the data back between one station to another station to another station for repeating.
But that is going to be for the stations, for the gateways to implement, not
Yes.
the individual users.
Yes, that's going to be for the gateways, but the individual users will be able to use the digipeating functions of VAR gateways.
That's
So in other
excellent.
words, right now, when you get a VARA message, it depends on the internet to get from one gateway to another gateway. In other words, unlike packet, which is sent over PACTOR between gateways should the internet go down, VARA will work over the air as well through PACTOR and through its own VARA for stations to use as digipeaters as necessary. But that's, like I said, it's just in beta testing right now, but seems to be working very well. And I highly look forward to that happening. It's open. It's going to be open beta next week, and we'll see what goes from there. But anyway, we could do a whole thing on VARA. That's my program of choice. But anyway, I just want to cover other programs and modes that are used out there. This is for those of you that don't know, that you grew up in Texas and you never did any ops anywhere else. This is fldigi, which is used by NBEMS, the Narrowband Emergency Messaging Software Suite, which has a whole bunch of components to it. This is a free set of programs distributed by WB1HJK, I believe. I forget his spell site. His name's Dave, and he's a developer of it. You can get it off links of the ARRL website. And there's a whole bunch of different modules that you can or cannot download with them. There's fldigi, which is pretty much used for message handling, much like Winlink. It has some forms in it. There's FLAMP, which is for receiving photographs and other type of media. There's just a whole bunch of programs. Some people love it. Some people despise it. I've used both that and Winlink. And Winlink, it seems to me to be a lot easier, but a lot of other people swear by it. Other programs and modes. There's RADI on the left, radio teletype, no error correction. That's the oldest form of digital radio besides CW, by the way. And on the right is PSK31. You can recognize that waveform because it looks like a football coach with his arms up in the air signaling a touchdown. Very recognizable waveform. Got Domino X, which is primarily used by shares. It's twice the speed of PSK, and there's no forward error correction needed. So it's a very robust form of waveform. And what is shares, you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Shares is used by the Department of Homeland Security for messaging related to safety, maintenance of law and order, finance, public health, et cetera, et cetera. And if we do participate in a regional or nationwide drill, you can count on Domino X and MT63 being the modes that will be used. So it's not a bad idea to know what they are and be familiar with them. The MT63 is another very fast speed transfer. Go up to 100 words per minute. It's got extremely good error correction. The only bad thing about it is it's very wide. You can see on the two waterfalls below, it takes up, excuse me, an entire kilohertz of bandwidth, and it takes up a lot of space. So MT63 is not a mode you want to use at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on 20 meters because you will make a lot of hands angry, and we do not want angry hands. So anyway, enough about programs and modes. Let's talk about forms. Forms are the backbone of message handling, whether it be a ICS form, a TransStar form, an American Red Cross form, an ARRL radiogram. Forms are the most important thing for message handling, and knowing which form to use and how to use it saves time during a real incident. So that's why we practice using forms. Some of the forms you're going to see, and I'm going to go down maybe a half a dozen of them that are the most common that we're going to see in what we do. The ICS 213, that's a standard NIMS messaging form. It's used by just about every public agency out there now that follows ICS and NIMS, National Incident Management System. There's a 213 RR, which is a resource request form. It's much like the 213, but you're basically requesting some type of resource. The 214, which is an activity report. American Red Cross has its own version of the 213. There's the HICS 213, which is the hospital ICS messaging form. Some of us that support our local hospitals may be asked to use that form to go between that and a different entity, which we'll get into a little bit later. There's the TechStar form, which is the STAR resource of Web EOC down here in Harris County. It's Web EOC is a resource management portal that a lot of emergency operations centers use. It may not be in your area, it may be in your area, but TechStar is one of those, one of the modules in that. And if for some reason you're in the outlying area and you can't get into the web, you can send a TechStar resource request right through Winlink as well. 205 and the 217, well, 205 is an incident action plan for an event, and the 217 is a resource availability of communication resources. The 205 and the 217 are primarily forms that are sent out, created and sent out by leadership. COM-Ls, in the absence of a COM-L, COM-T. The leadership prepares these hopefully ahead of the event, or as soon before the event begins or after the event starts as possible. So there you have it, as well as the most wonderful form in the world, the radiogram, which is ARRL NTS messaging form. We're going to cover most of these as we go along. The 213, most common form used now in ICS, used to be a 3-part paper version that they used to split into 3 hand-copied carbons and run around the building like chickens without heads. And this is on the right-hand side, the Winlink 2000 digital version. Same information, and we'll get into what you basically do with them. It was originally designed as a 3-part inter-office memo. There's the RR, the 213 RR, paper version on the left, digital version on the right for resource requests. It's initiated by the resource requester, whoever that may be, approved by section chief, command staff. Logs and finance sections also complete applicable sections of the form because you got to track where the money comes from, where it goes, et cetera, et cetera. 214 alpha, very similar. That's an activity report. Records details of any activities at any level, including single, resources, equipment, task forces, basic incident activity documentation, and a reference for after action reports. And this is important because if you're ever called to testify, what did you do on such and such a date? What did your group do? What operations did you perform? An activity log, whether personal in the 214A version on the right, or for your group, is very important because it basically, rule number 1 that I learned the first day I became an emergency medical technician back in 1981. If you don't write it down, you didn't do it. So this is a good way for personal and group accountability. Which brings me to the radiogram, which has been in use since the 1900s. The military and the ARRL National Traffic System first started using it around 27. That was the best I could come up with for an origination date. And it was originally designed to minimize the time needed for messaging over limited and or congested radio channels. And they weren't quite as congested back then as they are now. And it's the most commonly used form for health and welfare traffic and praxis. It's also very CW friendly for those of you ham-fisted people. You see on the left, back in World War II, they used to use paper postcards, and they cost a cent to send it through the mail. It was 1 penny to send a radiogram. Now it's like probably $12, $13. On the right-hand side, you can see the hybrid radiogram 213 that's in Winlink. We'll get into that in particular now, but the ARRL radiogram is primarily used by groups such as ARES, MARS, NTS, RR, Radio Relay International, Salvation Army Team, Emergency Radio Network, NET, and there are lots of things to know about the radiogram in its purest form. We won't get into everything because that could be a 3-hour class in and of itself, but the most important things to know is precedence, message handling, the check, the origin, pro words, and the audit trail that follows an official radiogram. A lot of people claim it's going to be the only thing left after the end of the world as we know it. Travels many, many millions of miles every year, radiogram traffic through voice nets and NTS and some of the groups that use it. Those of you that aren't familiar in the Texas, just in this area, the Texas Traffic Net 7290, the brand new Texas VHF Traffic Net, which Ron Bosch has just started to implement, our new Texas traffic manager. the CWNet TEX, the 5th region cycle, Central Gulf Hurricane, et cetera, et cetera. There's hundreds and hundreds of online resources to find out about radiograms. Like I said, it's a training in and of itself. And for those of you that don't know what that CW means, it's if you can read this, help. All right. So now that I'm an expert on using forms, how about a weekly digital check-in now? So this is where we get into a little more specific stuff about D14 Northwest, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it. At the very least, you'll get maybe a couple of ideas. Let's see. All right, digital check-in format for Northwest 14 for the next 5 or 10 minutes. It's going to be each week. Every station participates in our Sunday night Northwest Net, has the opportunity to send test messages digitally. And for those of you that are always asking, who is the current distribution list? Because it seems to be out there in different forms, and some of them have everybody, some of them have older people, some of the new people. We try to keep it up to date, but this is the official list as of today. And those are the call signs in Winlink that it gets sent to, as well as Ben down at the bottom, Ben Gillis, he's back. I took a little break there from being net control, and he's back. So I don't know if he's here tonight, but if he is, welcome. Good to hear you again. And each week, the net control and the backup net control has to take all that digital check-ins, usually between 70 and 90 digital check-ins per week, and input them into a spreadsheet. We have to list the mode, the band, number of messages in each mode, number of messages in each band, etc. And many arguments have been made against sending multiple band messages. Sometimes we get 4 or 5 different vara HF check-ins every week. I personally don't have a problem with it. The more the merrier, because it allows you to test your setup, your propagation, your connectivity. But it can be more of a pain in the neck for the person who has to interpret it. So here's the caveat. Every week, this is what the net control, backup net control sees in their inbox in Winlink. And this is just a subject line. This is from back in August, I believe, or September. You can see that that subject line kind of drives us crazy because there's no consistency week to week on what the subject line is. So we have to look, we could sort it by sender. Okay, so we can make it a little neater than this, but some of them say ACT, some of them say check-in, some of them say WL2K, some of them say 213 dash, some of them just say UHF login, some of them don't give the mode, et cetera, et cetera. It has a tendency to make our heads explode. So I'm going to tell you, this is what we need for a digital check-in here in Northwest 14. In the subject line of each message, we're going to concentrate on tonight. We need the mode, the band, the gateway that you're using, if any, and the word drill. That is what we need. That is what we would like to see in that order, preferably, as long as you put the word drill in there. So those of us that receive emails from different drills during the week, like some of the ARES senior officers get them from 4 different groups every week, Southwest, Northeast, Northwest, and they have to collate them. So if they're, and they also receive regular messaging during the week too. So if you put the word drill in there, or Northwest 14 drill, just to give them a better idea. Here's some examples. Packet VHF, WOMAC 10 drill. VAR UHF, KB5 HCD11, and we'll get into that particular package receiver shortly. VARA 40, KC5 GOI, I think that was in Poland I used once. Here's some more ideas. Telnet, drill, RDOP 17, drill, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Here's a Slovenia station that I use on 80 meters once in a while to get in. I know KD5U, John, likes to do the DX when it comes to sending in HF, which is kind of cool. But you get the basic idea. So make the net control, backup net control happy by putting something along these lines in the subject line. It's not an absolute mandate, but it has been looked at by Sean and by Dave. They don't have a problem with it. And several of the other net controls have looked at it, and they're fine with it too. So if you could do something along these lines, it would be very helpful. Anyway, enough said. Now the body.
Lee.
Yes, sir.
Part of that's in conflict with the script for the net control. We don't ask them to put the digipeater's call sign in the subject. We ask them if they want to put it in the body of the message.
Yes, and that's coming up in the body thing. But when we did the preview of this with Dave, I didn't even have the node in there at all, and he asked that we do add that in there for his
Who's tracking that? Because we're not putting that on the spreadsheet.
No, this is for Dave. But this is basically that part of the header, or that part of the subject line would be for the maintainers of the nodes. So they don't have to go into the body of each message to see what node is being used. That's just to make Dave's job easier because he's responsible for the upkeep of these. I know there's other people that do it, but Dave primarily asked that that be a part of it because it would make his life easier. Now, you're not always going to have this particular subject because we may use different forms for checking in each week, which we'll get to a little bit later, that you don't need to put this stuff in. It's going to be done a different way, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's just go to the body, and I'll show you what I mean a little bit later. I think you'll understand what I'm getting at. What the gateway peep, that's Dave, wants to see the gateway, the frequency, and any other information that might be helpful in him deciphering whether the gateways are healthy or not. In other words, NU5DE check-in via WOMAC over RDOP HF 40 meters. That's the frequency located. This particular person's in Herndon, Texas, got an IC70 150 watts with a diamond vertical 30. And if you had problems getting in or any other propagation report you want to give to the maintainers. The more info you put in the body, the better for the people that maintain the gateways. And it is, in fact, looked at every week. He's very diligent about that. He's very vehement about that. That information is definitely important. And please do not cheat. This defeats the purpose. And it's not rampant, but we do catch every once in a while. Could be a mistake. Somebody sends in 7 different modes from 7 different frequencies and bands, and they all come in over telnet. So yes, it's a lot easier to send 7 messages in one shot over telnet, but it kind of defeats the purpose of the health of our gateway system. So, all right, so it's not a weekly drill. You enter the form fields in the body with the provided requested information. That's just taking us out of the check-ins for a minute. All right, real quick notice about templating, okay? Scripting and templating in Winlink. If you have a lot of experience using Winlink Forms and you know them front, back, sideways, and if all of a sudden you got called up on a Saturday morning and had to run to a deployment spot and start sending digital messages with 213s, then by all means, there are ways to set up pre-populated templates and scripts that allow you to save time. It's not recommended. It makes you lazy, complacent. I stopped doing it. I was doing it myself. And a lot of people made the point, you know what? Yes, it makes life easier for us, but if you're going to go out in the field someday and you're not familiar with how to use these forms and you're just pre-populating them automatically, it does take away from the experience of learning. And nobody is that perfect. Anyway, so it's Sunday or Monday or Wednesday or whatever, and your digital net is going to be started. So Sunday morning, first thing you want to do is start Winlink and create a new message. You want to choose your recipients, and that's the list of people that I went into before for the 14 group anyway. I called it STX ARES 14 Northwest group, but it contains all those emails that I spoke about earlier. You want to put the subject in. Remember, at the very least, mode, band, gateway, and drill, and enter the message. Now, this is just a plain Jane message. Doesn't have a template, doesn't have a form. All it is an email sent over Winlink. You can type the text of the body in at the bottom. Very simple, weekly check-in using vara VHF on the WOMAC 10 gateway, 14609, whatever you happen to be using, 7100, 50 watts, there's your information, frequency congestion. That's the simplest, easiest way to send a non-form email. Short, sweet, gets the point across, and the subject line is easily sortable and decipherable by the people doing the paperwork. Once you get that information in, send the message. Vary the gateways that you use is always a good idea. If you use the KB5 HCD up at Transtar every week, it's great that Transtar is 99% of the time operating. I think I looked at the stats, it's been up for like 5 months without a single downtime. But that doesn't really provide any information on the health and welfare of the other nodes in our area. So don't use KB5 HCD for everything, because A, it could be down. B, it could be congested. And C, it doesn't help the packet station maintenance people to figure out how everything else is working. So all's went good. Ready for your weekly check-in net. Now, what about those forms that we were talking about probably about an hour ago at this point? When do we use those? We're going to go through a couple of scenarios. Night before planned drill or real deployment, you're told your position is going to be, and those of you that are not in this area won't have any idea where I'm talking about, but apply it to you. Klein High School parking lot, you're going to be assigned to pod number 22. And as soon as you set up, send a 213 to the TransStar Emergency Ops Center of your status, if possible, using HF. So you get out your trusty Winlink, fire it up, get your radio running, you open up a 213. First thing you want to do is put in the incident name, whether it's Hurricane Bloomfeld or whatever. If we have any letters left in the alphabet, you put that under the incident name. If it's a drill, you make sure you put the exercise in there, whatever it happens to be. Person who it is addressed to. Net control at N5TRS. This particular call sign that you know is receiving it, you can put their call sign in there. If not, just put the served agency's call sign. Now, the from field is important. This is the person who's actually physically sitting in front of the computer and sending the message. Okay, so if your call sign is Bob Jones, N7BOB, and you're ComS, comm operator, whatever, that's what you put in the from position on a 213. And we'll get to another variant later. You put in your subject line. If you want to keep it simple, mode band gateway, if it's an exercise, or whatever the subject may be. Request contact, request ICS advice, request resource of 213RR, whatever it happens to be, put that in the subject line. Now, Winlink Forms allows you to click in both of these boxes, and it will make a current date and time. So you click, hit enter, click, hit enter. Message body is where you send the pertinent information. If it happens to be a drill, if it happens to be a resource request or a request for a PIO to show up, that's where you put the pertinent information is in the body of the message. Now, approval. This is where it gets a little bit different. If you're serving an agency, in other words, if you are at a pod number 22, and there is a communications leader there, whether it be Sean or somebody else, a ComT, a ComL, whoever's running the show at your location, and they walk up to you and say, hey, I need you to send this message to so-and-so requesting this. That's the person's name that goes into the approved by and position title down at the bottom, because that's the person that is originating the message. And they're signing off on it. I mean, technically, they're not really signing off on it because you're putting it in there. If the message is coming from you, if you've set up your station, and there's nobody there that's telling you to send this, you're just following your orders from the deployment order, put your own call sign in there and your position. Okay. Scenario number 2, you're deployed during an active hurricane and asked to provide a current weather report through national weather to the National Weather Service through your net control station. In this case, once again, and 5 TRS up at TransStar. This is just another form. As you can see, when you send that message, the current subject line is already filled out with the correct information. It's sent as an attachment, and the person who gets it will be able to just click the line, and it will come up looking just like this on their screen, which is kind of neat because it gives them the information in the same form that you put it in. And not every form works that way. We'll get to that briefly. We'll cover that. Scenario number 3, and this is kind of pertinent to what we're doing in a couple of, actually a week. Red Cross person-to-person drill. This is not what this one is, but similar. Red Cross person-to-person drill asks to send an ARC 213 to N5WAJ on 145.05 using vara. You're told that the ARC drill number is 10-20-20. So you pull up your ARC 213, if that's the form you're using. You'd put in all the information, the Red Cross drill number, the incident name, message number, if it's a message that you're sending that's numbered for whatever reason, precedence, routine, emergency, health and welfare, whatever test, person who's receiving it, who's sending it, subject, date, time, message, approval, same as a regular 213, just a couple of fields added for the peer-to-peer. For the American Red Cross. And you'll notice the subject line you don't need to use the ARES weekly drill subject formatting. It's a common mode and frequency for all participants on this type of a drill. So that's what would go in there. You wouldn't put band mode relay because everybody's using person-to-person vara going to N5WAJ. Okay. Scenario number 4. Those of us that work at hospitals through the Hicks system, Tomball and Northwest and Houston and Methodist and all this stuff, you're getting deployed to one of your served hospitals. This is for 85 Mike Zed and people up in Montgomery that work for Tomball and all that. And they ask you to provide, Dr. Bob comes up to you and asks you to provide a bed report to the CMOC. The CMOC is a catastrophic medical operations center operating under CTRAC, which is the Texas Advisory Council for Emergencies. And they want to provide a bed report. So this is a little bit different. You pull up your hospital bed report form, which is in there. The person that is originating the message is Dr. Bob, who's over your shoulder saying, I need you to report the following bed form to the CMOC. Put your reporting facility where you're at, Dr. Bob's contact number, Dr. Bob's email address, whatever information they give you, how many beds are available, et cetera, et cetera. And any additional comments, if you're running on grid power, whatever the doctor tells you to do. He's the guy originating the message. You're just passing it on. And you would send the form like that. And then the next thing that they'll see, this is what it sends as. You'd put it down as N5TRS as the person you're sending it to, as well as a carbon copy to the medical director at list.ctrac.org, because that's what your instructions were. Bed availability, a bed hospital availability report from the admin, because the hospital's broken down, can't get there, can't get out, and they want to know how many beds you have left. They want you to send it to the distribution list of CTRAC as well as TransStar and obtain confirmation. And you'll notice that it's addressed to the 2 people, net control, as well as the medical director at CTRAC. And you'll see the sending station is your call sign. So that's how it gets tracked on who sent it. Anyway, in conclusion, Winlink digital modes, when used properly, are an invaluable resource for message handling. Frequent and variable practice using different forms modes maintains proficiency and familiarity for when you know what hits the fan. Form and message formatting makes the job of the recipient much easier to decipher and record when it's consistent and common and it has concise information that's needed for any particular event or practice. Checking in whatever day your drill is and participating in as many exercises as you can makes for skilled operator. The 213 will more than likely be the go-to form used for most messaging, but not all. For simply weekly check-in, keep it simple. Unless we throw in a little surprise through an email during the week. We're going to ask you to send in a special form using a special mode during next week's digital check-in. We may have a separate drill for it just to keep people on their toes. We may be instituting something like that in the future. So that being said, wait, one more thing. For those of you that are aware, or maybe not aware, Winlink allows you to make your own forms. So you don't have to use the standard forms that come with Winlink. And me and Kirk, N5XJB, have been doing some experimenting with some form creation. He's an old school HTML hand code guy. He knows his Visual Basic and C++, and I'm a visual kind of guy. So between the 2 of us, we've been working on something specifically designed for District 14 Northwest. We may never use it, but it's something, it's in its preliminary form and basically looks like this. This is a form that'll pop up. It'll be in everybody's personal folder, and basically it will automate the process for everybody that wants to check in during the net. And I'm not going to get into all the specifics. This is still, like I said, a major work in progress. It can be customized to any particular area. If the Southwest wanted to use it, we can put their local gateways in the, oops, sorry about that. Come back here. Back here. Thank you. You can put their gateways in the box here. It's got a place to put frequencies, whatever mode, whatever band you're using. Coordinates will be sucked right out of your radio into Winlink and sent along with it. And the form, email form that it sends to the recipients will automatically be able to put into a spreadsheet with the click of one button. We're building a script so that the net control or the backup net control, right before the net starts, can hit one button in a spreadsheet macro, and everybody that checked in, no matter what mode, what band, what method, what gateway, will all be populated to a spreadsheet that we're going to keep in the cloud on Google Forms, so that any of the ARES people that need to see that, it'll be real time and take a lot of the manual stuff out of it. But that's just a little tease. So anyway, like I said, this is version 13.6. We started out at version 1. 6 is minor, 13 is major. So you can see where we've come. And it's still a lot of way to go. So that being said, I just want to thank a bunch of people that helped out with this. John, Sherwin, of course, Sean, Kirk, N5XJP, Planter Pete, Dynamic Dave, and the rest of the D14 team. Gave a lot of suggestions, a lot of feedback. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more before this is 100% official to be used by us. But comments and questions are always welcome. That's my email there. And if you've got any complaints, you can direct them to Dave, MB5HJB. That being said, I'm going to think that's the end of that. And I'm going to find my